Yep. I'm just going to grab my coffee. I'm going to send this link to him. Then which he should have it, but I'm just going to make sure he's got it. And I'm going to grab my coffee and we'll do this. All right, what's going on, y'all? Good to see everybody on here. I know we've got, oh wow, we've got a ton of people this week. I love it. All right, so we got more and more people who are going to be joining us here. I think they all came to hear the one and only Ariel talk here. So Ariel, great to have you on here, bro. Super pumped. We're already on Facebook, so that's good. All right, real quick, let's start with a word of prayer, and then, man, I'm going to dive right into it and give it up to Ariel because, man, if I know anything about him, is that he has some phenomenal content, and so I want to spend as much of the time here today letting him talk instead of me. So, man, God, I thank you for every single person on here. God, I thank you for churches. I thank you for the calls to ministry that you've placed on the lives of every single one of the people here. God, I thank you for even allowing us to be able to have the tools and technology to be able to make this coaching call happen. God, I pray for the finances and resources of every single church that's on this call here today. God, I pray for innovation. God, I pray that you would continue to bring the right leadership to their churches. God, give them innovative ideas. And God, that you would help all of us figure out the best way to use social media and technology in this time to be able to connect with people and grow your church. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, so some of you guys, I'm sure, saw my email, but man, I asked Ariel to come in here because he is a church assimilation expert. When he talks, you want to take notes. So we are streaming this live to YouTube, so you can always go watch the replay on our YouTube channel if you want to as well. But Ariel always brings it. Every conversation we have, he always has some really, really cool ideas. So I asked him to come in here and share his genius with everybody, because right now online assimilation and discipleship is a huge thing, and that's his area of expertise. So the man, the myth, the legend, Ariel, take it away, bro. It's all you.
Awesome. Thank you. Really excited to be here with you, Chris. You're just, I love how you're just kind of pouring into churches and stuff, especially in the season. So I really, appreciate that. So I wanted to just kind of begin first and foremost, I want to say about 15, maybe it was about 15 years ago, I was sitting in a pastor's meeting. And in this meeting, we're going through like our membership process. And we realized at this point that our membership process wasn't quite working, right? So it wasn't doing so well. And the average person, this was a church at that point, we were a church of about 1,500. And the average person was taking somewhere about 3 to 5 years to become a member. So you can tell it was taking a little while. And in the middle of the meeting, we're talking about this. One of the pastors turns around and he makes this joke. He says, it's easier to become a member of heaven than it is to become a member of this church. And when he said that, it kind of, you laugh it off. When somebody says something and it kind of like hits you, but you want to make, yeah, that didn't really hurt, So I had one of those moments, and I walked away realizing that our process for just assimilation connection was inadvertently keeping people away. So even though we were trying to connect people, somewhere in our process we were keeping people away. And so we started to really think through the process and talk through the process a little bit. And one of the major things that we realized in this time frame was that we didn't really have a full understanding of, number one, we didn't have a full understanding of how people felt. Right. So we kind of just treated everything like, hey, if we can just get you to Sunday, If we can get you into a service experience, you're good. You know, you're a step away from accomplishing everything we want you to accomplish, and not realizing that Sunday services was an attraction magnet, but not necessarily a discipleship process. Right. So Sundays was a great way of attracting people, but it wasn't a way of discipling people. And the problem in this season now is that the easiest thing to do is to stream online, which to me, when I look at the stream, I think of it as synonymous to Sunday, because it's one-way communication. So it's not necessarily a dialogue, more like a monologue, where we're sending information to people, and then, you know, we're hoping that they catch what we're throwing. And so in that process, we realized, one is that our Sunday worship experience it was almost like boxing with one hand behind your back. So you were able to throw a left hook, but you didn't have the right to follow up with it. And so that's when we realized, man, we really need to make sure that our connection process and our follow-up process is top notch. The second we realized is that our people had a framework in their mind that even just the membership process was about accomplishing or achieving a certain level of spirituality. So you had to get to a certain place spiritually before you can get in. And I had to get people to start thinking differently. It was all about not keeping people out, but it was about how do we get more people in. And even in that time frame and in that process, we immediately started to change. When we started to change our membership process, we had to add some support ministries because there were some people who were not ready to become members at that point in time. They had stuff in their life that needed to get taken care of. And what we were saying in the past was, hey, get your stuff together and then come and see us. And our new philosophy was, you don't have to get your stuff together. We're coming alongside to help you. Because at the end, we're not as concerned about you becoming a member as we are you becoming a disciple. Right? So, and make sure, because it's not always synonymous. And I think sometimes in our minds it is synonymous, but it's not always synonymous. Sometimes people have to take the long road, right? The Israelites had to go 40 years into the desert before they can enter into the promised land. Sometimes people have to take the long road to get to the destination that God has for them. And so in that time frame, kind of looking at this, we came up with a 6-step process for what we kind of call our assimilation. And we gave it a title of attending to belonging. So literally you go from attending the church to belonging to the church. So I'm going to kind of outline those 6 steps. Step number 1, which I think most of you guys are having a version already that you're doing, is the evangelism, right? Before they can even come to your church, they've got to hear. Someone has to invite them. Someone has to say, hey, this is our church. Come hang out. Come be with us. And I like to look at it from 3 different components. One is there's lifestyle evangelism. So by lifestyle evangelism, what I mean is you've got to empower your congregation to invite friends and family to the church, right? So it's not just about did they come to the church? It's also about the vehicle you utilize, which is people, right? So if someone is a part of your church, if they're a member of your church, how do I get the members of my church to invite friends and family to come to the church? And again, when I'm saying come to the church, I don't just mean come to the physical building. I also mean coming to a service. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The second was what we called organized outreach. So again, before we kind of all went into a quarantine phase, the church was able to organize outreach opportunities. And then the third was what we called, I started calling a social media outreach, which is how do you utilize some of these venues to reach people? So evangelism, which leads us to step 2, which is now creating a welcoming environment. And one of the things that we realized quickly is that our ushers, our announcements, a lot of the way we framed our services was not necessarily geared towards making guests feel at home. It was, we were communicating, but we didn't have our guests in mind. Our ushers, you know, we ended up having to do customer service training because, you know, they were getting together and they were talking about yesterday's baseball game or yesterday's football game. They were high-fiving each other and guests were coming by and no one was welcoming them. I mean, for me, it was the equivalent of going to someone's house and they don't say hello to me, right? It's that equivalent. We took a look at, when it came to the welcoming, how we did announcements. What were some of the jokes that came from the pulpit? I'm in New York City, and we were predominantly predominantly a church that was Hispanic. So now when a host came up, and I still remember this experience, a host came up and they made a joke. It was a joke based on Spanish food. After the service, I met with a couple, and they were of Indian descent. And I said to them, "Hey, how did you feel about that joke? Did you connect with it?" And they kind of said to me, "We didn't know why everybody was laughing. We felt lost." And it just made me start thinking, everything we say, we've got to be filtering it through the lens of, does it help our people feel closer, or does it help our people feel more disconnected? Recently I was in this church in New Jersey, and they were a Spanish church, and they had a guy who was Caribbean in the meeting. And so I noticed real quickly, because he stood out, when they did the greeting, everybody was loving and hugging each other, except for this one guy. The Caribbean guy was kind of getting like just a, very courteous high five. And it was just like, man, he does not feel at home in this place. And that's part of creating this welcoming environment. You want people to join the church. Well, before they can join the church, before they're going to, serve in any capacity, they want to feel at home. They want to feel embraced. They want to feel like this is a place where I can bring my kids. I can trust them. I can trust you with my children. I can trust you with my family. So welcome environment is number 2. Number 3 is your follow-up process. And I feel like your follow-up process is the equivalent to dating. So when I've been married now 16 years. And when we were first dating, I remember thinking to myself, if I proposed to my wife on the first date, we wouldn't be married today. When we first started to kind of hang out with each other, if I just text her once a week, I probably wouldn't have much of a relationship. If I called her every once or 2 to 3 weeks, I wouldn't be married today. And so there's a part of your follow-up process that you've got to see it as you're pursuing a relationship. You want to connect with these individuals, and you want them to feel valued. The gift you give communicates value. How you follow up with them communicates value. What you do, the words that you put in your email copy. And I'm sure that you guys have an idea of, a follow-up process. But a lot of times when I'm looking at people's follow-up process, their emails and their content is all about, look how awesome we are as a church. If I sat down at a restaurant with my, at that point, girlfriend, and all we did was talk about me, she would eventually lose interest or think that there was something wrong with me. And so writing emails and creating content that's all about how do we meet their need, because at the end of the day, everyone has a need, and the answer obviously is somewhere in scripture. There's some principle in scripture, or there's something that you're going to do that's going to answer those things, but it's being able to identify their pain point and have an answer for it. So it could be as simple as, hey, if you've ever struggled with making wise decisions, right? You've struggled with making wise decisions. I'm going to connect with that. I've also struggled with making wise decisions. I've made bad decisions in relationships and at my job, but I started to get better. You know how? I started to read the Bible. Well, this Thursday, we've got a Bible study that we're doing. We'd love to invite you to come join us for it. So I'm not necessarily spending most of my time talking about the Bible study. I'm talking about them and their needs. And then I'm tying in the Bible study. You got to think of it this way, right? So if they're at point A and point A is struggling, point B is success, your Bible study is the bridge. No one cares about the bridge. They care about the destination, right? So when you're writing and you're creating content.
Bro, that's so good. I'm sorry. I'm totally interrupting. I just got to amen. Like, if you guys did not hear that, like that was the perfect example. And that was in like the Bible study being the bridge, right? Because you're saying, hey, it's not just like, hey guys, we got a Thursday night Bible study. You literally said, hey, here's what life used to be like right now, identifying a problem they may or may not be struggling with, right? But like, oh yeah, like I kind of feel that way too. It's like, yeah, here's how I solved it, is by studying the Bible. That's what changed everything, right? And man, and we've actually got a Bible study coming up this Thursday, bro. That's perfect, right? So it actually becomes about the problem that like the solution to the problem that they're having. The solution is studying the Bible, and hey, here's a bridge to get you there. Is we've actually got a Bible study this Thursday. Sorry, keep going, but man, if you guys are not taking notes, holy crap, that's fire. That's fire.
I love how you can marry holy and crap together. so yeah, so you got your follow-up process. You're connecting people, and so that's step 3. All about the follow-up. And with step 3, it's all about building trust, right? Again, you want, as a pastor, to be able to give people guidance and direction, but before they're going to take your counsel, they've got to be able to trust you. And that's why consistency is important. I had one church one time. I asked them, about their follow-up process, and I still remember they said to me, "Yeah, it's Sister so and so. That's our follow-up person." And I said, "Hey, you may want to think about automating some of it. Continue to use Sister so and so, but let her be the addition. Automate your follow-up, and then that way, at least you're going to consistently be getting emails out." So 3 weeks later, I get a call back from this pastor. He's like, "Hey, you know what? Sister so-and-so has been sick for 3 weeks now. So our first-time guests have not heard from anyone in about 3 weeks." And I was like, "Oh, man." And that's why you want to make sure that you have a automated process so you're consistently communicating. And then pro tip in this, utilize video. Shoot a quick video of yourself. "Hey, my name is Pastor Ariel, man. I just want to thank you for hanging out with us this past Sunday. I'm so excited that you were with us. God has transformed my life. About 6 years ago, God did X, Y, and Z. And my prayer is that God might do the same for you." And shoot it with your spouse. Let your spouse be a part of the video, because if you're a guy and your first time guest is a single mom, you might be intimidating, right? And vice versa. If you're a lady and you've got a married man who's watching your video, that might be a little awkward for him. So bring your spouse, bring your kids, let them know you're real folk. And and that's part of your follow-up process, utilizing video. From there, you want to lead into a membership process. And your membership process, I utilize, obviously many of you may have heard of Church of the Highlands, the whole growth track. So I like to utilize the 4-week process that they have. For me, the biggest thing is all about purpose. Like, as a church, I feel like God is wired. As an individual, I feel like God has wired every single person with purpose, and that my job is to help them identify what that purpose is and to help them unleash that purpose. And so if you've got a personal mission and the church has a mission, and if we can find a way that every time you accomplish the church's mission, you also accomplish your personal mission, bingo, all of a sudden now, every time there's a win for the church, there's also a personal win for the volunteer. And that begins by helping people understand their purpose. And so that's where kind of membership falls in. And after 4 weeks, one of the next steps that I like to include is what I call a next steps conversation. And what the next steps conversation is all about is helping people identify, okay, now that we've identified your purpose, what is your next step? Because when we started to do our membership class, one of the things that we found, and I think I mentioned I'm here in New York City, about 60% of the people who were going through our membership process were in a common law relationship, meaning they were not married, but they were living together. And so it kind of just, in the first 2 cycles we did it jolted us, because it caught us by surprise. But what quickly my mind started to think into was, hey, it's not necessarily about whether I make them a member, right? I said this earlier. It's not about membership, but it was about discipleship. So what are the next steps they need to take to be able to grow? And so we modified our marriage ministry. Our marriage ministry used to be all about, you get engaged, and 9 months later you get married. We have a whole process. We turned that around. We turned our premarital class, we called it Marriage Foundations, right? So, and then we added this thing we call office weddings. And so almost, I would say twice a month on a Thursday, I was marrying people because they said, hey, we're ready to get right with God. We've got kids. We don't want to wait 9 months, 12 months, whatever it is. So all of a sudden we're giving them next steps. They weren't serving in ministry yet. They weren't necessarily members yet. We didn't even care if they were members. We just cared about where are they spiritually, you know. And so that was marriage. That was we were providing counseling for people. We were trying to answer the question, hey, how do we help people grow spiritually? Once they kind of went through our membership process and they were saying, hey, we're ready to serve, you know, we identified ministry as a next step for people. So we were doing ministry, we're doing small groups at the same time. Then we had an onboarding process, which is step number 5. How do we onboard people, right? I read this stat one time from Marcus Buckingham. He has a book called, oh man, what's it called? Break All the Rules, something like that. It was one of his first books before he got into all, you know, the whole strength stuff. And he said people who have a best friend at work typically last longer and are the most productive. And I said, man, if that's true for work, maybe that should be true about churches. And so what if instead of me just getting people to start serving, the goal is to get people to be in relationships with some of the people they're serving alongside? So the onboarding process became a part of, how do I get people to build relationships? So you're new to the ministry. Can I find you a friend? Maybe not necessarily a best friend, but can I find you a friend in the ministry? Because I want to help you stay closer. Because yes, I'm going to put you in a place where you're excited to serve, but I also want to make sure that someone's going to be around you to encourage you when things get rough, to put their arms around you when things are challenging. And so we added a 30-day onboarding process. And so that was kind of step number 5. And then step 6 is we realized that this process kind of was like this machine and everything was working into one another. But in order for it to be effective, we needed solid leaders. We needed people who understood the heart of the ministry and who understood how to lead people effectively. And so we actually, step number 6 was our leadership development process. And it was a 3-tier process. So tier number 1 for leadership development is, how do I get volunteers and turn them into leaders? And so this was kind of like, you know, we would do something maybe, you know, every 2 to 3 months. We'd invite people. It was open to everyone. Step 2 was, now how do I turn leaders into ministry leaders? And this conversation was more around skill sets. You know, how do I make sure that if I'm going to give you 4 or 5 people to lead, you've got everything you need so you can lead well? And then step number 3 was, now that you're leading at a high capacity, you know, I'm going to have you become an elder or a pastor of the church. And obviously that level was a invite only level because it wasn't open to everyone. You couldn't just raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be a pastor here. But it was a way where we had to make sure that if we have a process for how the church is going to function, we also need to have a process for what we're bringing people into. How are we developing leaders? Because one of the things that I noticed, at least on our end, was all of the best leaders were trained in their secular environments. So the church wasn't necessarily doing anything to develop leaders. They were just inheriting good leaders. But then we had other people who were faithful, but not necessarily good leaders. And there was a major difference in it. And this may sound harsh, but there's a difference between being faithful and having capacity. And so we needed to make sure that we were developing people and raising their capacity. Because if I had someone who had potential, but they weren't operating their full potential, whose fault was that? It was mine, because I didn't develop their full potential. And so we had to look at the process and say, how do we get people to actually develop and to grow? And so now we had this mechanism that was kind of this machine that was working, but we also had people who understood the heart, who had the skill sets and had the capacity, you know, to kind of run this process. And so I know, Chris, you mentioned 15 minutes. I may have gone past 15 minutes, but I gave it.
Take as much time as you want. Take as much time as you want.
Well, I went through the whole process, so I don't know if there was a Q&A or any questions at this point, because I kind of flew through it.
Yeah, so let's do this. If you guys have some questions, let's put them in the chat. Probably the easiest way to do it since we've got so many people on. Let's just type in the chat if you guys have questions for Ariel specifically. I have a couple of things I'd like to, while we're waiting for people to submit a couple of questions. I just want to make sure I got, I'm sitting here taking notes like crazy, bro. So let me make sure I got all six. So the first one is evangelism.
Yep.
So I missed, I think you said that was like a three-step, right? The first one was lifestyle evangelism. The last one was social media outreach. What was the second one?
Organized outreach.
Organized outreach. Okay.
Yeah. So this is when the church does events, things of that nature. Hey, you're going to do an Easter egg hunt. You're going to do, the church is kind of organizing the actual event.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So evangelism, which consists of lifestyle evangelism, organized outreach, and social media outreach. Love that. And then number two was creating a welcoming environment. Number three was your follow-up process. Was number four next steps?
Yeah. Number four was like membership, next steps, moving them into, so I try to get people into a membership process at least somewhere within 3 months of them first visiting.
Okay.
Typically, obviously, people may be there 6 months or more, but my goal is to capitalize on the decision, right? And I also want to lower the barrier a bit. So I think a lot of times when we talk membership, we use language around membership. It creates this distance. Like membership is like, I've got to be serving Jesus for like 20 years and I have to have a degree, and for me, membership, I want to lower the barrier, because if you can get into heaven, you should be able to be a member of our church, and so that's where for me, it was like, okay, I don't necessarily need you to be perfect. I just need you to be willing to yield. I need you to be willing to grow. And then we'll walk with you and help you when it comes to becoming developing certain habits. Because at the end of the day, spiritual growth, if you really, really boil it down, spiritual growth is about consistency, right?
Yeah.
Doing the right things consistently. I had a kid one time who I prayed for at an altar, and he's like, I really, really want to change. And I said, come to church. I said, I just need you to do one thing. Come every Sunday. And then he was like, yeah, but I smoke cigarettes. I said, don't worry about smoking. You want to keep smoking, keep coming, because I know what's going to happen. Over a week or two, you're going to get convicted. God's going to transform you, and you're going to stop smoking. So I'm not worried about you smoking. Yeah. I'm worried about you coming consistently. Yeah. So So week 4 was all about membership, and I'm just trying to get you into an environment. I want you to feel like you're a part of the family. Honestly, we don't even use the word membership as much as when we first created this process, we were calling it family covenants. We use that terminology because we want people to feel welcome at home.
I like that a lot. All right, so we've got a couple of questions here, and then I have one as well. I'm writing it down so I don't forget about it. First one here is there a timeline before someone is invited to be a pastor?
So the answer is no, not necessarily. I think we look at fruitfulness and character. So once we kind of identify and say, hey, this guy has a potential, we don't know for sure, but we want to put him in positions that are going to cause, there's a saying that when you're squeezed, whatever's inside of you comes out. Yep. So we want to put you in those positions where you're squeezed. So it might mean, hey, let him lead a small group, or hey, let him lead a prayer meeting, or let him lead a men's ministry. Let's see, before we even promote you and call you Pastor so-and-so, do you have the gifting and the capacity to lead people? And we only really find that out when you put people in positions to do that. So it's, hey, let's test the giftings inside of you. Let's test the fruit, while simultaneously, we want to make sure that we create a mentor relationship. So when we're developing pastors, at least my recommendation is, it's not necessarily, hey, you went through a class, but it's, hey, do you have the DNA and the heart of the senior pastor? Senior pastor, let him spend some time with you. Let him ask you questions. Let him connect with you. let him become, in some respects, a son of the house, so that when he's actually on his own, he's leading out of the DNA that has been imparted in him. So
That's
yeah,
great.
so not necessarily a timeline, but I think there's an opportunity to make sure that you're testing fruitfulness, giftings, character, and it's not just whoever you're looking at as the pastor, but it's also the spouse. You got to look at them as a couple in this, because I've been in environment, I've had conversations where one spouse is on fire and the other spouse is like, I don't even know why we doing this, and it can make the relationship, it can make the ministry very challenging when one is on board and the other one isn't.
Yeah. Okay. Man, that's some great points in there. I'm glad we're recording this because I'll probably go back and take a look at it myself. There's already some things I want to talk to my church about, especially what you said about using some of that like family covenant and family language instead of membership. Man, I love that. I'm gonna talk to my church about that this week. I really like that. All right, so we got a question, Jay. Pastor Jay, let me ask you this. So you said which of the next would be most important for a new church start? Because a new church start may not have the capacity at the time. Can you explain that? What do you mean by which of the next?
Well, he had several next steps, and out of the 6 that he had, it's going to be difficult, I think, and I could be wrong, but I thought it would be difficult in order to maybe go through all of those steps within a particular time frame. Just to get to a point of mentoring would be difficult, or the welcoming may be easy because you have the labor or the manpower to do that. But so which one of all of those steps would be most important for the one who is starting? Like you're 1, 2 years old, you don't have that kind of capacity where you have so many different people doing so many different things.
Okay, great question.
Yeah, so I would frame it. I'm gonna ask you a question, but I would say frame the question a little differently. I think you wanna get to all 6, but which one should you start with first?
Correct. Yes.
Right. So I would say the first thing I try to start with, whenever I'm helping a small church get off the ground, we're looking at their membership process, and we're trying to simplify it. So where, let's say you were an established church, I'd say to you, hey, do a 4-week membership class. If you are a brand new church, I'd probably say, hey, let's go with a 1 day. How do we just summarize this and it's a 1 day? How do we get it on video so you don't have to necessarily be the person seeing everything? And the reason is because your membership process is kind of like the crossroad. It's almost like when people become a member, now everything they do is adding value to the church, right? They're serving, they're giving, there's a transformation that's happening inside of them. And so that's almost like that line in the sand. So I look at it as, how can we get people to become members of the church so that they feel committed, they feel like they're on board, and they can start serving. And again, I would take it and say, hey, make it as simple as possible. Do 1 Sunday a month, or do 1 Sunday a quarter. Make it simple. Talk a little bit about your DNA. Talk about some of the expectations you have of the church. And then if you have the time, then meet with them personally. Or have maybe 1 or 2 of your other leaders help you meet with them. And make that and as you continue to develop, then add a couple of more layers of complexity to it. But for now, start with the membership. Obviously, you want to have a welcoming environment. You want people to come, so that to me is like part 2 or the next step, and then evangelism. Because at the end of the day, if no one is reaching other people, your church is never going to grow. If you've got a church of 30 or 40 or 50, and no one in that 30, 40, 50 people are actually reaching anyone else, your church is going to stay the size it is. And I don't go, and this is going to sound a little weird, but I'm not as crazy over, in the beginning, excellence. I think, obviously set a standard of excellence, but not perfection, right? So make sure that there's a distinction between the two. There's a distinction between perfection and excellence, But I think if you're pursuing excellence and, it's okay to do without. I think the most important thing for a Sunday is that you are connecting your Sunday worship experience to whatever next steps you may have for them. And obviously your communication, you want to, people are coming to church and they're looking for an experience with God. They need something transformative. They need to know that there is something greater than them that is able to impact and change their situation and change their hearts. And that's going to be communicated by some of the preaching. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's huge. Thanks for talking about that distinction, especially Ariel, for new churches and stuff. I think that's really important. Harry just brought up something, talked about how helpful texting church has been to stay in contact with both new people and people that have been around for a while. That's huge. I'm actually going to find, if you guys haven't tried texting church and you want to, let's see, Tyler Smith, who runs Texan Church, I convinced him to give all the churches we're partnered with 90 days free of Texan Church. Nice. So if you guys want to try it, yeah. So let me. I'll find the link. I'll put it in the chat here. If you guys want to try it, you get 90 days free. And he told me to tell you guys, hey, I'm literally not making this deal for anyone else, but I'll make it for you guys. So it's just for us.
So Texan. So when it comes to the follow-up, the way I've been having churches use it is, so now you everything's streamlined, right? Everything's online. And either at the end, I like a host to come back after the sermon, because I find, depending on the pastor, sometimes the pastor doesn't always do a good, like he's so caught up in the moment, he doesn't necessarily do a good job of recapping any next steps you may have for someone. So whoever is your host, let them kind of come back again and say, man, pastor, that was an amazing word. X, Y, and Z was transformative. Hey, if this word really spoke to you, and you want to take some next steps, you've made a decision to give your heart over to Jesus, just text, I'm in, or I gave a commitment to Christ, whatever term you want, something simple, to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever the phone number is. Hey, if this was your first time visiting us, make sure that you text guest to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever the phone number is. And what I've noticed is that I'll tell churches, hey, have people comment, do a hashtag first time guest in the comment section. But the churches that are seeing the best results are utilizing the, hey, text this number. And so what happens with text in church is the moment that someone texts a number, because there's an automation behind it, automatically the system kicks in and starts sending out text messages, emails, whatever you have pre-recorded. So even though your church might be small and you don't have a high capacity, you spend maybe a week or two creating some of this content, and then the system starts kicking in for you.
Love it, man. That's huge. And I like the key is the part that you just said, like the automation, right? Like having everything automated is a game changer. No matter how big or small your church is, that automation is a game changer. Yeah. Let's see. Aaron said, we've added language. We know most people like to be silent watchers, but we'd really like to connect with you. Love it. That's awesome, man. All right. So Ariel, let me ask this. We're going to do a little bit more Q&A for anyone that wants to stick around a little bit longer. But Ariel, let me ask you, if people want to get your help, right? Whether it's one-on-one or the coaching program, how can they get connected with you and go deeper and kind of get your help developing this at their church?
You know what I'll do? Since Tyler already gave something out for free, I'm going to put a link in the chat, and this will be a 60-minute, what we call an assimilation. Is that the right one? Yeah, a 60-minute, what we call an assimilation audit. And so we jump on a call for 60 minutes with pastors and try to identify 3 key next steps. And that way we can kind of just take a look at what the process is, answer whatever challenges you're having, and then, if you from that point forward want to allow us to help you, give us the privilege of serving you guys, then, we'll talk about that at the call also. But at the end, you'll still walk away with 3 key next steps that you should be focusing on.
I love it. Okay. So I just, So that's in the chat if you guys want to take Ariel up on that. And that's awesome. Thanks for doing that, bro. That's very cool. All right, let's see. So here's what I wanted to ask you about, Ariel. I've actually got a lot of questions, but I'll go with just the first one. So one of the most intriguing things that you said to me was how you talked about people don't just need to be connected and be on a serve team, that they actually need a best friend, right? And so I remember reading First Break All the Rules like years ago, right? Yeah, a great book. And I remember, so that principle, that idea is something that we've talked about before at my church. Although we always talked about it when I was on staff. That was one of the things we talked about more from a staff point of view, right? So we had a pretty big staff, and it was like, man, and so the way to get people to cut down, because one of the hard things is, especially as you start to grow and you get some talented people on staff, it's hard to keep, especially your creative people. Because, man, like, you know, it doesn't matter how big the church is, you can't pay them as much as they can in the secular world, right? Yeah. So how do you get people, keep them connected, keep the vision in front of them? And that was one of the things we always talked about was, okay, if we can get them more connected with other people, right? If they have other best friends at work and best friends on staff, it's gonna be really hard for them to go anywhere else. But I've never thought about it in terms of the congregation. And so I really like what you said. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you guys do that? Like, how do you get someone connected? Do you just introduce them and hope it goes there? Do you have some type of process? How do you get someone connected with another friend at church?
Yeah, so this concept really hit me. I kind of was looking back. I can't remember why I was doing this, but I was looking back. Someone had asked me about how long I was at the church and how I got there. And my mom and I got saved around the same time. And my mom was connected with this one woman. Her name was Nancy. I still remember that. They went through membership class together. They did a whole bunch of things together. And then fast forward 20, 30 something years later, I think it's about 20 something years later, my mom's still there. Nancy's moved on to a different church, but I knew that the relationships was what kind of kept my mom through that season. And the same thing for me. And so I said, well, you know, what happens is when we think of relationships, we think of it in the organic nature. So we always keep thinking, okay, you know, relationships will naturally happen. But for some people, I'm an introvert, right? They don't naturally happen. I mean, you know, and when they do, it's so far and few in between. So I've got maybe like 5 friends that I call on a regular basis. That's it. You know, that's just how my personality is. But there's so many people that are like that. So now looking at it from the perspective of pastor, I'm thinking, how do I create an environment where people do feel welcomed? So when someone joins a ministry, I like to partner them with someone. So obviously this isn't, you know, I'm working through the ministry leader because I can't handle all the details. But let's say we've got an usher team. I'll talk to the usher leader and say, hey, you know, we've got about 4 or 5 people who are looking to join the ministry. Who are you partnering them with? And for 30 days, every time this person serves, that person is serving alongside of them. You know, so we're building those mentorship relationships, you know, and, you know, and you've got some relationships that click and then some relationships that don't. But at the end of the day, what I've seen is, especially, and it's really, a lot of it is on the ministry leader. The ministry leader who sees their responsibility of just, let's say, ushering, sitting people down as their primary responsibility is the one who creates an environment where people come in and out. The ministry leader who handles the task and shepherds people and cares about them personally and is asking about how's your wife doing, how's the kids, that typically person is able to keep people around, because people are serving, people are looking for connection, right? They're looking, they say, I want an opportunity to serve, but what they're really saying is, I want to accomplish something, but I want to do it with some people around me, right? It's about connections. And so that's a responsibility that I'm putting on the ministry leader. And I've got to make sure that, you know, the ministry leader is taking a look and saying, okay, I'm going to be able to serve. I'm going to be responsible for helping people connect and grow, which means he's also got to delegate, because he's still got to make sure that the responsibilities of the ministry is getting taken care of. You know, so that's where pouring into the ministry leader and that leadership development is important, because what we're doing is, when we're talking leadership development stuff with ministry leaders, what we're really saying is, hey, this is how we want you to lead your ministry. These are the 4 or 5 values we need you to operate from. But yeah, it's on the ministry leader, but it's also on the process that someone's in for the next 30 days. Whenever, friend number one, I'm partnering that new person with friend number one. Whenever friend number one is on, you're on. You guys, and then friend number one, make sure that they meet everyone else. Make sure they meet everyone who's a part of the team. And obviously, it's a training you're going to consist. It's one of those things that you train once, but you've got to make sure you put you're constantly checking in on, because it's easy for us to focus so much on the task oriented side of ministry. And there's so much to do, but we want to make sure that there's a relational component so that way people are staying. People don't just stay because of what you do. They stay because of the relationships that they've built.
Bro, say that again. That was really good.
Oh man, I said that off the cuff.
Okay. Okay. So you basically, people don't stay because of what you do.
They stay because of the relationships they're in.
That's so good. Bro, I'm taking notes as fast as I can freaking type right now.
I know, I see that. I'm like, wow.
Okay, I love it, man. All right, I'm literally just gonna have to go back and take some more notes, man. You brought a ton of stuff today, so let me ask one more question as we kind of wrap things up. So, Ariel, what do you think is the best way? So like right now, obviously, like churches can't open up. I know there's some churches in kind of the Midwest and the South that are starting to slow roll, opening. We talked about on our coaching call last week, just 10 different questions you need to be asking about reentry and kind of this comeback process, right? Because it's not just like, hey, we throw the doors open and everything's open again. In my opinion, I don't think that's actually really going to happen until we have a vaccine, right? Where everything is just like, hey, we're all good. It's back to normal, right? So it's going to be kind of this slow ramp up as it goes back in. So during this time of online church, whether or not it's a hybrid of services and online, or if churches are 100% online, what's the best way to use this 6-step framework that you just rolled out in kind of an online capacity, and what platforms are the best way to do that?
Yeah, great question. So starting with evangelism, I think one of the great opportunities is to get your people to start two things. One is to start sharing. Every time you do an event, you do anything, they need to share it on social media. They need to personally message friends and family. The other thing that I've got a couple of churches doing that I've gotten some pretty positive feedback on is get a list of all of your first-time guests for the last 6 months to a year. Get 10, 15, 20 of your members to start making those phone calls and inviting them to come to the actual online class, or not class, but to the online service. So you're still doing evangelism, but now you're doing it a different way. You're welcoming first-time guests. When it comes to welcoming people, your moderators play a major role in that. So whenever you go live, you should have a moderator on your chat who's welcoming people and just kind of saying, hey, thanks so much for hanging with us. How's the kids? How's the wife? How's the family doing? Where are you guys watching from? I also love when, the pastor, when you do it live, the pastor is interacting with the comments, and he's seeing and saying, hey, we've got people watching from this place. We got people watching from that place. Or, hey, type this X, Y, Z into the comments. But utilizing a moderator. And the other part, and I never thought of this, so I spoke to a designer. I interviewed a designer one time and I asked them about branding. And I thought they were going to give me some design answer. And they said branding is all about managing the experience your customers have. I never thought of it like that because I'm not really a designer. I'm thinking brand is how pretty your colors are and how nice are your fonts. And they were like, no, it's about, so your flyers, your video, anything you produce communicates welcoming or communicates, stay at a distance. And so that's where you want to make sure that you are taking a look at your brand, your graphics, your design, stuff as simple as, do people know when you're doing stuff? So I'm working with one church and they've got a like a rotation of different videos. We're kind of calling them shows that they're doing throughout the week. So Monday is like motivational Mondays, and they've got a psychologist that they're interviewing. And then Tuesday is something else Tuesday, and Wednesday is worship Wednesday, and all these, you know, alliterations. But one of the things I want them to do is create a TV guide style graphic, you know, so Monday at this time, Tuesday at that time, Wednesday at that time. You know, the other thing is about creating a welcoming environment is that the senior pastor plays a major role. So if you're not smiling, that communicates something, you know. And I know, you know, smiling, like that's just small, but yeah, if the joy of the Lord is your strength, communicate that joy, because there are a lot of people who do not have joy in this season, you know. So smiling, you know, the words you use, welcoming words, even when you're speaking, you're preaching, you know. I remember hearing one sermon, one guy preach, and he said something to the effect of, you know, Moses, right? You guys all know the story of Moses. And afterwards, I pulled him to the side and said, actually, everybody doesn't know the story of Moses. So give me a one-liner, you know. Make sure that when you're communicating, you're thinking about the guest who has no experience with your church, and let them feel embraced and welcome. So that's the welcoming. Your follow-up, I think you got the text in church. That's definitely, you know, part of your process. Just be thinking, how do I utilize video? And is there an opportunity to either utilize postcards or to utilize phone calls? So where in the past we fell in love with like the thing was, you know, emails and social media and texting, right? That was the cool thing, because the main thing was postcards and you know, snail mail and stuff. Now that the main thing is texting and emails, the cool thing is phone calls and postcards. You know, like I get 3 pieces of mail a week, you know, because if people want to communicate to me, I don't even get bills in the mail anymore. So imagine getting a postcard from your senior pastor just saying, hey, thanks for hanging out with us this past Sunday. And there's some information or something, again, about content that's serving them. You know, I'm realizing that everything is cyclical. What was cool yesterday, you know, may not be cool today, but it will be cool again tomorrow. So it's, you know, it's like bell bottoms came back a couple of years ago. It just, so again, don't fall in love with tactics, fall in love with strategy, but not necessarily the tactics. Membership, man, Zoom, I've got a church that's doing, they did their last membership, what are we in, April? They finished the last week of April, the first week of April, and they added 8 new members utilizing Zoom in this season. And they were like surprised. I said, why are you being surprised? People want to join the church. You're just taking your process and you're moving it to a different vehicle, but your process is still the same. And one of the coolest things about Zoom is breakout rooms. You know, so if you don't want to do membership, then do small groups, but do literally do a one, you know, like do kind of like a 30-minute or maybe a 20-minute teaching, and then break out into smaller groups. And you can take a look at breakout rooms in Zoom. You're familiar with breakout rooms, Chris? Yeah. So
yeah, breakout rooms are awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, you utilize that. All of a sudden, you got 100 people who are taking your Bible study, but then you broke them up into 10 groups of 10, and you know, and that's a great way to get people engaged. And so membership, utilizing that for membership. One of the things, the next step is obviously onboarding. So you've got to get very creative when it comes to doing ministry in this season. But one of the things that scares me about this season is that I found that ministry has become very focused on a small, select, technical few, and everyone else is kind of like just chilling and watching. And I think this is where we've got to really get creative and figure out ways, how do we engage our church, our members? So if you were a first impressions person, you were responsible first impressions, then come be our moderators. You know, try to find, how do I take what they were doing formerly and pivot to the season now? Obviously, if you were in the children's ministry, you should still be part of the children's ministry. You know, do certain events. I've got one church that they're doing, I forget the exact age range, but like Friday is Family Friday, you know, and they're doing something with different age ranges, you know. So figure that out, but get people serving. Don't let it be that this is a season where just because we can't meet in the building, people can't do ministry. And then leadership development, I think when it comes to the leadership development, this is the opportunity. You may not necessarily do organized classes, but you've got to make sure that you're connecting with your key people. So you're investing in them spiritually, you're challenging them, because what happens is whenever a crisis comes, there's that moment of shock and awe. But when the shock and awe wears off, who's doing ministry? Who's serving people? Well, as a pastor, you want to train your people to think that way. So we're not sitting back and saying, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? It should be, no, we're the light in this darkness. Let's step the A game up. Let's do what we've got to do. And that's a training that needs to happen. So there are some churches that I know that they were in this time frame, they were kind of sitting back and saying, man, what are we going to do? The finances are down. What are we going to do? And then I've got other churches that they're like, yo, we're ready to take it. They've got members, literally they got members who drive up to the building, pick up the boxes, right? No one's interacting. They leave the boxes out, they pick them up, and then they're dropping off boxes with supplies and stuff to people who have COVID. They'll drop it off in front of their home. There's no human interaction, and maybe they follow with a phone call. But that's how they can serve their community, or make those phone calls. Hey, I just want to pray for you. I heard that you were sick. Or hey, if you've got a little bit of extra finances, purchase pizza for families in the community. Do stuff like that, but never stop doing the ministry. And you as the leader, you don't do all of the ministry. Train your people to do the ministry, and you're like the coach. You're like Joe Girardi. I'm a Yankee fan, so I had to throw that in. You're like Joe Girardi. You're not playing the game, but your ability to lead the team impacts what happens on the field.
I love it, man. That's good. That's really good. Man, Ariel, thank you so much for coming out here, bro. I know we went a lot longer. I told Ariel, I was like, hey, man, just share for like 15 minutes or whatever, and we'll do it. And it's been an hour. So, man, thank you so much for coming on. You guys in the chat, Ariel put a link where you can actually sign up for that call with him and do an assimilation audit. I wanted to end this with one more thing. So Aaron Butler, if you're still on here, bro. So Aaron and I were texting back and forth earlier this week, and Ariel made me think about this. He was specifically, Ariel, when you're talking about breakout rooms and stuff. So actually, I'll post the link in here. But so for those of you guys who aren't nerdy like me and don't follow all the social media stuff, Mark Zuckerberg just announced in the last week all these changes that are coming, new products that they're working on and stuff. And there's some really cool things, but the most important, especially for us, is messenger rooms. So messenger rooms is basically inside of Facebook Messenger, basically just think Zoom for Facebook, right? So it's basically where you can start a messenger room. You can send out a link, just like a Zoom link or a Google Hangouts link, but it's all through Facebook, and people don't even have to have a Facebook account to be able to jump on, right? But so that you don't have to download, like the Zoom app and all this sort of stuff. It's just a Facebook, or it's basically Zoom for Facebook. They're called messenger rooms. I think it's going to be huge. And Aaron had some really good ideas. We were just texting back and forth this weekend of how to use those messenger rooms. And I think they would translate into Zoom as well, but it's specifically for messenger rooms. Aaron, do you mind just kind of sharing a little bit, some of those thoughts, some of the stuff that we were talking about this week? If he's on here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go back to our conversation, make sure I say it right. I had it written down. But yeah, just some of those messenger rooms, we started to put it in our context and try to figure out how can we actually, take things from the prayer ads and then obviously minister to people, because it's not about getting the job done. It's about getting the people done, right? We don't use people to do ministry. We use ministry to build people. So the things is, a couple of things we wrote down is, a meet the pastor room for post service after online. So people can jump on with the pastor if they have questions about God, questions about things. And these are beta things. These aren't things we haven't done yet, because messenger rooms aren't a thing yet. So these are just some ideas. A host room for those who plan their visit and want the virtual VIP experience. so we can have people who planned visits and we can give them a virtual VIP experience with a dedicated host. You talk about connectivity, that'd be a huge thing. And then even the pastor can jump in and welcome, hey, we're so happy to have you on today. We're super excited. And if they're from the prayer ads, then you've already have made that connection. And then you jumped on again with them, that weekend with an online thing. Are you kidding me right now? Trust me, that's gold right there. And then a couple other things is just some prayer rooms where people can jump in and get prayed for. I think that prayer rooms are going to be big with these messenger rooms. What we're hoping to do is move people from, because we know we have the automated prayer ads that hit all the times. And sometimes we get them all different times, right, guys? You guys know what I'm talking about. Like, you want to be there, dedicated. What if you had a dedicated prayer room and you can say, hey, listen, I'm going to be on tonight from 7 to 8 o'clock. And you can jump into our prayer room and get prayed for right there. You have them come to you. Come on, somebody. That's time management right there. Yeah. So those are just a couple things. And just, obviously growth track, small groups, membership stuff. You just gotta, sometimes some of these things you gotta throw and see what sticks and see what doesn't, and not be afraid to start something, and just kind of see the value in it and what's going to work best in your context. But you just gotta be willing to take a step of faith and go out there and do it. So
I love it, bro. I love it. And so I literally, without asking you, Aaron, I just posted the text that you sent me. I just copy and pasted it into the chat. So you literally see Aaron's ideas. I don't want to take credit for those. I'll tell him they're straight from him. But I love that meet the pastor, the host room, the prayer rooms. And there's a couple in there that I think kind of overlap with some of the stuff that Ariel was talking about, like growth track, right? Membership and small groups, being able to use Zoom and breakout rooms. And then as messenger rooms kind of roll out, it might be even, the reason I'm excited about it is it seems like it might be an even easier transition to take people straight from messenger right into a messenger room, or from your Facebook Live into a messenger room. Like I love the idea, Aaron, you were kind of talking about it, like being able to, as soon as the live stream's over, it's like, hey, if you're new here, man, stick around, or here, click on this link. And, Pastor Aaron is going to be in a meet the pastor, room or whatever, where we're just going to spend, the next 15 or 20 minutes kind of getting to know each other, and you can ask him anything you want. So Aaron's doing an AMA inside the link, hop into that messenger room and get started. Right. So, or using it for prayer afterwards, even for existing members. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do. But I think that's something that's going to be huge. And with as the explosive growth that Zoom has seen over the last 6 weeks, whatever it's been since COVID really hit, I think that's just going to continue to explode. Microsoft just launched something like Microsoft Connect, or I don't know. So anyway, it's basically their version of Zoom, right? People are going to keep coming out with this, but obviously the ones with the most users are going to win, and that's Facebook. 2.5 billion people. Well, we're all already using Facebook with the prayer ads and those types of things to connect with people. So I think it's just going to be a natural extension of kind of what we're already doing to be able to use those messenger rooms. So something to think about. And as we come up with some more stuff here over the next couple of weeks, we'll roll that out to you as well. Messenger rooms aren't even live for most people, so it's still something that is in beta, but they're kind of rolling out here pretty soon. So I linked to the article so that you guys can read Mark Zuckerberg's post. There's also if you kind of search around for it, you'll actually find there's a video, like a 30-minute announcement video that Mark Zuckerberg did talking about all those new features. They even have something called Messenger for Kids that I think is kind of a cool idea, so that kids can actually message back and forth and stuff like that, but still parents can control everything. So that's kind of a cool idea. So anyway, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool innovation happening. So we'll do this again, same place, same time next week. Ariel, thanks again for coming out, man. It was fire. As I said, if you guys go to, a lot of you guys have the YouTube link. If you don't, it's just, if you just go to YouTube and type in Church Growth Agency, it'll pop up, and that's where all the replays are that we post every single week, including this one, which I myself am telling you I'm already going to go back and watch because your 6-step framework is phenomenal, and there was a lot of gold nuggets that I think you said off the cuff, Ariel. Even some of the stuff that you didn't even realize that you were saying, bro. like the one that I wrote down, that they don't, one that I love, you said, don't fall in love with the tactics because tactics change, right? Strategy lives forever. So if you find out the strategies that are going to work, right? The tactics, whether it's Zoom or, messenger rooms or Google Hangouts or something that doesn't even exist yet, all those tactics don't matter. Those will all change, but the strategy of connecting with people, whether it's online or in person, that's the strategy that's going to live on forever. So, and then I love what you said about they don't just stay because of what you do; they stay because of the relationships that they're in. Right? Mm-hmm. That's huge.
It's huge.
So I'd encourage you guys, go back and watch the replay. Ariel, thank you so much for coming. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, bro. Bye. All right, see you guys.